Welcome back to Another Thing. I'm Larry Menti. We are joined by John Cohen, who is the former acting secretary at the Department of Homeland Security. He is also with Rutgers University and their Institute for Emergency Preparedness and Homeland Security. Thank you again, sir, for being here. It was interesting that one of the big topics in the campaign right now is trying to get social media sites, big social media sites like Google and Twitter and Facebook, to work more with the federal government. And when the former CEO of Hewlett-Packard, Carly Fiorina, was asked the question, she said, all you have to do is ask them. They're more than willing to. You don't have to legislate, you don't have to force them, just ask them. We haven't asked them?
Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that. So as it relates to social media are platforms where people engage in free speech. And there are constitutional protections with regard, in this country, with regard to free speech. You, as an American and safeguarded by constitutional rights, have the ability to have extreme thoughts. You can say things that are derogatory towards other people, and you're protected by the Constitution in doing that. And social media is therefore an extension to your constitutionally protected rights. Industry does not want to be in a position of having to determine whether something you are posting is representative of constitutionally protected free speech, or whether it represents incitement or is part of an effort to recruit or incite violence by a terrorist organization. So I think industry has been willing to sit down with government authorities to think through how best they can be cooperative. They have, at times, on their own, taken off incendiary or other problematic postings that have resided on their platforms. But it's a complicated issue to sort of holistically say or hold industry accountable for making a determination whether something is free speech or whether something is related to terrorism.
Is the government, is Homeland Security, are they putting pressure on these sites to be more active in finding posts that could be a terroristic post or could inspire a lone wolf?
Well, many of these sites on their own have put in place pretty extensive vetting mechanisms to determine or to identify problematic postings and take them off. So,
and do they turn them over to Homeland Security at that point?
At times. And not Homeland Security so much, but law enforcement. So there has been a long-standing relationship between a number of these companies and law enforcement when they identify posts that may be associated with criminal activity, whether it's a kidnapping or child exploitation or other types of crime, of identifying those posts, capturing the information, the envelope information, if you will, of where that post is coming from, and in an appropriate way, sharing that information with law enforcement.
One company I didn't name when I mentioned the companies was Apple. And Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, was recently on 60 Minutes. And when he was asked about helping the government to track down terrorists by allowing a backdoor to his encryption system, he said, no, we're not going to do that because it puts people's privacy at risk. Is he right?
So again, a complicated issue as it relates to encryption. On the one hand, our economic and national security, depends on the ability of legitimate companies and government organizations and others to protect their sensitive data from theft through a cyber attack. We have had numerous examples over the last several years where private sector companies and even the Office of Personnel Management lost control and suffered through the theft of very sensitive personal data. And we use encryption and other data protection technologies to protect that sensitive information. On the other hand, just as legitimate organizations are turning towards data protection technologies such as encryption, so are criminal organizations and others, including terrorist organizations. So the balance that has to be created, or not really a balance, the dual imperative that has to be pursued is that we both have to be able to use encryption and data protection technologies to protect our national and economic security. At the same time, industry needs to work more closely with government to ensure that terrorists and criminals can't use it for their illicit purposes.
And just to wrap it up, to take everything we've talked about and put it into a final answer, can enough be done right now to identify some of these lone wolves across the country if they are indeed being inspired by social media, or are we just not there yet?
A lot more can be done. A lot more must be done. It's not going to happen within the federal government alone. It's going to take the federal government working closely with local communities and local authorities and building capacity at the local level to better identify these lone wolves and to take steps to stop them from committing violence. But it's also going to take government working with the private sector. We all need to work together on this because, to your earlier question, the threat now is more significant, is more complex, is more disturbing from my perspective than anything we've faced since the 9/11 attacks.
And I lied to you. I do have one more question based on your answer, and that is how far apart is the private sector and government in that regard? And do you see us getting to the point, which has been talked about legislation or the government imposing itself on the private sector to get more of this information?
Well, I think that the most encouraging step I've seen has come from Congress, has come from the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, Michael McCaul from Texas. He's calling for the creation of a industry government commission that will actually create concrete solutions to this problem. Right now, the debate has been essentially a false debate. We can either protect the country by preventing terrorists from using encryption and restrict the commercial use of encryption, or we can, let everybody use encryption and security, security becomes secondary. That's not the right debate. The conversation we need to be having is what more can we do to both protect our critical information that is fundamental to our national and economic security, and at the same time prevent these technologies from being used by dangerous organizations.
Great. Thank you, sir. John Cohen, I know you're on your way now to talk more about Homeland Security at a symposium right here in Rutgers with the FBI and local law enforcement. So you're always working to protect us. Thank you very much, sir. I really appreciate it. John Cohen, former acting undersecretary for the Department of Homeland Security and professor at Rutgers University. When we come back,
it is the cornerstone of the American judicial system, trial by jury.